In 2018, the global trade system began to fracture, sending shockwaves through economies and boardrooms around the world. For decades, nations had grown increasingly interconnected, relying on a complex web of supply chains that spanned continents. But suddenly, the stability everyone had come to expect was under threat. The United States, under President Trump, launched a trade war against China, marking a dramatic shift in international economic policy. This was not just a political maneuver, it was a declaration that the old rules of global trade were being rewritten. The conflict was marked by a series of escalating tariffs, each side imposing new taxes on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. The U.S. aimed to address what it saw as unfair trade practices, including forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft by China. But the consequences quickly rippled far beyond the two superpowers. This move disrupted long-standing supply chains, shaking the very foundation of globalization. Factories slowed production, ports saw fewer ships, and businesses everywhere began to worry about the future. Japan, deeply connected to both the US and China, suddenly found itself caught in the crossfire. Its economy, built on exports and international cooperation, was now at risk. The United States was not only a key security ally for Japan, but also a vital market for its goods. Meanwhile, China had become Japan's largest trading partner, making the stakes even higher. Japanese companies faced tough choices. Should they absorb the rising costs of tariffs, pass them on to consumers, or consider relocating operations to other countries? Each option carried risks and uncertainties. The Japanese government watched anxiously, fearing that a prolonged trade war could trigger a global recession. Financial markets became volatile, and business leaders braced for more turbulence. The dream of a stable, interconnected world was fading, replaced by a new era of uncertainty and competition. The rules that had governed international commerce for decades were now in flux. Japan had to quickly adapt to the changing rules of international commerce, rethinking its strategies and alliances to survive in a world where economic conflict had become the new normal. Japan initially responded to the escalating trade war with careful, measured diplomacy, seeking to avoid taking sides too openly. Japanese officials understood that any misstep could have significant consequences for their economy and security. The government's approach was to remain flexible, watching developments closely and preparing for rapid changes in the global landscape. This delicate balancing act was led by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, whose leadership was marked by pragmatism and a deep understanding of international relations. Abe recognized the importance of both the US and China to Japan's future, and he worked tirelessly to maintain open lines of communication with both powers. While the US openly criticized China's trade practices and imposed tariffs, Japan chose a quieter path. Japanese diplomats engaged in discreet talks with Beijing, aiming to de-escalate tensions and prevent the trade war from spilling over into broader regional instability. These behind-the-scenes negotiations were crucial in maintaining a fragile peace. Japan's strategy was to strengthen economic ties with China, its largest trading partner, while at the same time maintaining its vital security alliance with the United States. This dual-track approach required constant adjustment and careful messaging to both domestic and international audiences. Abe's historic visit to Beijing in 2018 symbolized a new beginning in Sino-Japanese relations. The visit was marked by warm gestures and a series of agreements, with both sides pledging to cooperate on infrastructure projects and economic initiatives. It was a significant step forward after years of tension. Japanese businesses, heavily invested in China, watched these developments closely. They hoped that improved political ties would shield their investments and ensure stable access to the vast Chinese market. For many Japanese companies, the stakes were high, and political stability was essential for continued growth. However, Japan's leaders were acutely aware that they were walking a tightrope between two global giants. Every decision was scrutinized, and the risk of alienating either Washington or Beijing was ever present. The pressure on policymakers was immense as they tried to navigate this complex environment. To manage this, Japan tried to separate economics from politics, continuing robust trade with China while relying on the US for security and defense. This compartmentalization was never easy, but it was seen as the best way to protect Japan's interests in an uncertain world. Yet, as tensions between China and the regional order continued to rise, this strategy became increasingly difficult to sustain. The delicate dance with China required constant vigilance, adaptability, and a willingness to engage in both dialogue and deterrence, as Japan sought to secure its place in a rapidly changing Asia. Japan's hopes for a stable and mutually beneficial partnership with China were shattered by Beijing's increasingly aggressive actions, which sent shockwaves through diplomatic and business circles alike. What once seemed like a promising era of cooperation quickly gave way to uncertainty and mistrust, as Japan realized that its economic and strategic interests were at risk. China threatened to restrict exports of rare earth minerals, which are absolutely essential for the production of everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to advanced military technology. This move was a stark reminder of how deeply Japan's high-tech industries depend on a steady supply of these critical resources, most of which are controlled by China. This act of economic blackmail reminded Japan of past disputes, when trade tensions flared and trust between the two nations was put to the test. The threat of losing access to rare earths brought back memories of previous confrontations and highlighted the fragility of their economic relationship. It also underscored just how reliant Japan had become on Chinese imports for its manufacturing sector, making it clear that any disruption could have serious consequences for the Japanese economy and its global competitiveness. At the same time, military tensions escalated around the Senkaku Islands, known as Diaoyu in China, territory claimed by both nations. The waters surrounding these islands became a flashpoint, with both sides increasing their military presence and patrols. The increased Chinese presence in these contested waters directly challenged Japan's sovereignty and security, raising fears of a potential confrontation at sea and putting additional pressure on Japanese defense forces. Faced with mounting economic and military pressures, Japanese policymakers found themselves in a crisis, forced to urgently reconsider their strategy toward China. The situation demanded careful deliberation and decisive action to protect national interests. The hope for peaceful cooperation and economic partnership faded, replaced by a growing sense that Japan needed to adopt a tougher, more self-reliant approach in order to safeguard its future and assert its place on the world stage. China's behavior led to a dramatic shift in Japanese politics and public opinion. The debate over China ended with a consensus that it posed a significant challenge. Media coverage highlighted risks, and public sentiment turned negative. This shift allowed Japanese leaders to take a stronger stance. The government encouraged companies to diversify supply chains and reduce dependence on China. Japan increased its defense budget, preparing for potential threats. The nation realized it could no longer rely on hope, but needed to prepare for the worst. As Japan's relationship with China soured, its alliance with the US strengthened. The US welcomed Japan's alarm, reaffirming its security commitments. The alliance expanded beyond military security to include economic and technological cooperation. The US and Japan worked together on digital trade rules and secure supply chains. This partnership challenged China's model, promoting fairness and democratic values. Japan became an active partner in shaping Asia's future, not just a follower of US policy. The alliance was reforged in the face of a common threat, transcending political changes. The deepening US-Japan alliance was publicly displayed, especially for Beijing. High-profile meetings and joint statements signaled unity and concern over China. Military cooperation became more visible, with joint exercises demonstrating power. This public diplomacy showed the alliance as a dynamic partnership for modern challenges. It served as a deterrent, warning China of U.S. involvement in any aggression against Japan. The alliance's public display solidified support and reinforced linked security and prosperity. China's actions toward Japan were a strategic miscalculation. Instead of pulling Japan closer, China pushed it firmly into the U.S. camp. Economic threats and military pressure alienated Japan, seen as aggressive tactics. This miscalculation strengthened the U.S.-Japan alliance, now aimed at balancing China. Japan increased defense spending and took a more active regional role. China's actions warned other countries, damaging its international standing. Instead of a benevolent leader, China was viewed as a bully, losing regional influence. The U.S.-China trade war reshaped Asia's power balance, solidifying the U.S.-Japan partnership. This alliance, forged under pressure, became central to regional security. It evolved into a collaborative network, with Japan playing a proactive role. Shared interests and threats aligned U.S. and Japanese policies on various fronts. The partnership extended to include other democracies, forming a broader coalition. Asia's future is defined by competition between China and a U.S.-led alliance. China's overreach revitalized its rival's alliance, creating a stronger opponent. The U.S.-Japan partnership stands as a bulwark against China's ambitions.